So, psychologists and social science people are not usually very good at what they do. And everybody kind of knew that already, but I just kind of want to riff about why. And I don't want to riff about it in terms of the regular dissections about how the humanities departments at universities use a lot of critical race theory and gender studies theory, which is self-referential and nonsense, and therefore we should just throw it out. Because everybody said that part a bunch already, and that's not what I really want to talk about. I want to talk about the types of people who are drawn to fields like psychology and sociology. Even the good ones, even the people that maybe are intelligent and try to stay committed to some sort of scientific method, I still think that there's a problem with these people and the way that their work translates into anything accurate about mapping the human mind and how people really, really behave. And that's what I want to talk about. But first, I just want to say that the reason that I'm sort of talking about this subject is that I have a friend who's coming on the Gaytriarchy tonight at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, who I'm actually really excited about this. He's a really cool guy, and I talked with him last week sometime on my secondary channel, Prince of Queens live streams. He's a friend of mine that I actually knew in person in San Francisco. So, you know, you hear all these stories about my life in San Francisco and how everything was crazy and blah, 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 blah. Well, he can sort of testify about some of it. I only really knew him for like the last year that I was there, and I was there for about 7 years. And that last year was a particularly awful period. Like, that was the year where I was just completely miserable, definitely an alcoholic, and he saw that. So he didn't get to see the cool part when I was actually, you know, performing in shows and making music and theater all the time. I'm not even sure how much of my work he ever saw. He definitely heard a lot of it, though, because he was witnessing me revise my tracks. So he is actually a therapist of sorts. He's gone to grad school to get a degree in helping people better themselves, and I don't want to say a whole lot more than that, but he's actually a good guy, and he actually has the ability to relate to people as an individual. And my problem with people who seem to be drawn to things like psychology in particular, I have respect for some psychologists. Don't get me wrong. You know, Dr. Jordan B. Peterson is a psychologist. He's done some really good work. And I feel like he's somebody that legitimately understands people and the human condition. And I feel like I've met or read or heard about or listened to lectures of psychologists that are actually similar to Jordan Peterson in that way. Don't get me wrong. But keep in mind, I've just known a lot of people over the course of my life. I really, really have. You're going to be really, really hard-pressed to find anybody that's met more people than I have and met more people who are university age. You know, I lived in all these university-centric areas, these far leftist urban bubbles that have multiple different schools. And one of the things that I have always noticed over the years is that the dramatic majority of people who get into psychology itself are not people that actually understand people all that well. And I honestly think that the explanation for that is that these are people who are weird, and they don't really fit in, and they don't really understand why people are the way that they are, and so they start studying psychology because they find it fascinating, and they grow this weird obsession with reading about how other people work. But that's just not how human nature is. I'm sorry, but you cannot learn how to understand people with book smarts. You know, like, people say, does street smarts beat book smarts? Blah, 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 blah. Well, I'm sure with math and physics, book smarts is probably a little bit better. I'm sure with history, book smarts is probably a little bit better. But when it comes to psychology, I would 9 times out of 10, even somebody with a graduate level degree, if I was going to take somebody's advice about how people work, I would prefer somebody that I spent a few afternoons with and talked to for an extended period of time, and I just liked that person. I thought that they were an interesting, intelligent person that made good observations about people. I would take that person over somebody with a graduate level psychology degree in terms of giving advice about people, because that's always rung true, that these types of people who are actually just really social know more about how people work. And ultimately, I studied a little bit of psychology in early schooling, and I found it really tedious because it's always changing, and they're revising themselves and saying that they were wrong about certain things. And the thing is, if you have any common sense and any social skills, you can tell. Like, you'll be reading this stuff and you're like, I don't really know if that's true. Like, I am not sure if that is something that would be universal. And you raise your hand and you ask the teacher, hey, is that entirely universal? Because I knew this girl who supposedly she had this disorder, but blah, 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 blah. And the teacher says, oh, well, yeah, there's actually many exceptions to this. And they're thinking of taking that disorder out of the DSM because it's maybe not actually a disorder. And then 10 years later, oh, it's taken out of the DSM. And it turns out that my friend actually has a different diagnosis, blah, 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 blah. And that happens in psychology. And so it feels rather like trying to count stars. It becomes really, really exhausting anyhow. So I really don't like this notion that it's such an incredibly flawed science. And then on top of that, it ends up seeming to largely be dominated by people who never actually understood people all that well to begin with. People that were definitely rather weird and definitely very eccentric and seemingly had a hard time relating to people. And I literally am talking about pretty much every psychology undergrad that I ever met. Like, I had a roommate sophomore year in the dorms who was a psychology undergrad. He was a senior. And he was the weirdest guy. He was so weird to the point where it was like well known throughout our entire school that he was just an incredibly weird guy. And I feel bad about making fun of him because he was actually a nice guy. Like, he never did anything wrong. Like, I liked him all right. But he had a single unit. Like, we had this quad dorm room thing. So he had a single unit, there was 2 single units, and then I had to share a bedroom with this other guy. Well, the weird psychology, this is how weird he was. Apparently he would use that spray-on hair stuff to make his hair look thicker because his hair was falling out, even by senior year of college. And he would also put mascara on his hair, apparently. And I never actually, like, he was able to keep that secret from us. Like, we didn't see him do that, but I did hear him spray on the hair. Like, that was something that it was rumored, and then I heard him spray, and I'm like, oh, maybe the spray, maybe that's it. Oh my God. And then it all started to come together because we would notice that he would take a shower and come out of the shower with his boxer shorts on his head, because he didn't want to be seen with his hair looking like, I don't know, a big patch was missing from the hair. And so he put his boxer shorts on. Like, that wasn't suspicious. Like, he should have just told us, yeah, guys, I put on spray on hair and mascara, or maybe just shaved his head off or something, because like I don't know why you would think it's a good idea to, because his hair looked like it was thick, like he had a fair amount of hair and it was, you know, medium length for a guy. And so I guess he was thinking that he could trick guys into thinking that he had hair and that they would never touch his hair and it would literally come off on their hands, because he was gay. It didn't occur to him that that would be a worse outcome, that guys would touch the fake spray on hair that would literally bleed off onto their hands and fall apart into their hands. He didn't think that that was worse than just shaving his head or letting his roommates know that he was doing it. That is the mind of somebody who is also trying to be an expert about people. This guy is trying to become a psychology major and go on to like talk about how people are and how they maybe should be. No, no. That's, you know, talk about the blind leading the blind. So, and that's just been a thing. So for me, I look at psychology people and I've always seen that. It hasn't been something that has grown on me over the years, but it just always kind of seemed like that. That was always my intuitive reaction to such people. It always seemed like the people who really understood people were artists of some variety, largely, you know, writers. Writers are really good at understanding people if they are good writers. I mean, there's some wacky writers out there who don't really understand people and who are very alien, but man, my writing teachers, even in middle school and in high school especially, I had some really great writing teachers that really understood people, and that's what I wanted to pursue. And those were the classes where it seemed like the teachers were really connecting with people and talking about the human experience. And there was no pretense of trying to say that this was based in some sort of scientific method, therefore they know what they are talking about when they describe people. They were just saying, doesn't it seem like people are like this? And everybody said, yeah. Whereas in psychology class, yeah, a lot of the things that they said, they would say, doesn't it seem like people are like this? And you would say, yeah. But then you would find exceptions and they would try to weasel their way around it. Like try to say, well, that's not really an exception. It's only kind of an exception. Or actually, yeah, I think that that is an exception. And maybe it's going to be taken out of the DSM. And then it turns out that it does get taken out of the DSM. So I guess the point of this is go with your gut, listen to who you want to listen to, because you might be right anyway. That's how I've always felt. Now, I'm not discounting psychology entirely. I think that there is a potentiality that there's some people who are good with people, like they are people, and then they also decide to supplement their education in terms of psychology. And, you know, even some of the weird, freaky people who don't understand people can piece together information by looking at statistics, like looking through the numbers and looking at studies and comparing and contrasting. And there is a purpose to that. Psychology isn't complete garbage, but I guess, you know, be skeptical, use your skepticism, TM, when you're dealing with somebody who's very eager to say that they're an expert about people because they are a psychologist. Because that's not always a qualification in my book, if you think that I understand people, all right? Okay, see you at the Gaytriarchy, 8 p.m. We're going to be talking to some sort of a psychology. Yeah, I don't think he's so much psychology, but, you know, therapy, counseling type guy. But he's also a people person.